What's up guys, Mickle here, and in this video I want to go over something pretty interesting that Jaime Hogan just put on Twitter in regards to how he thinks the Ripple SEC case is going to end. Now I think this is pretty interesting to talk about considering we are right around the corner from a summary judgment decision in this case. I want to show you what Jaime Hogan is thinking, really break it down, because I think it's going to give you guys a much better idea of some potential outcomes on how this thing could end. Towards the end of the video, I also want to talk about a topic that's been going around the XRP community a lot lately. Is it all some massive conspiracy theory that the biggest banks in the world are going to be using XRP to transform their interbank settlement mechanism? In this video, I want to show you some pretty shocking evidence that we might be a lot closer to that than many people are expecting. Make sure to stick around to the end of the video to see that. You are not going to want to miss it. Like always, your support means so much to this channel. Make sure if you haven't already, you like this video and subscribe to the channel. I know it doesn't seem like it does much, but it helps me out so much and goes such a long way. Also, if you ever need a good place to buy some XRP or the Flare token, make sure to check out my favorite exchange Uphold down in the description of this video. With that said though, let's jump right into it, and I hope you guys enjoy the content. So it's definitely a shame that Jaime Hogan hasn't been making his legal brief videos. They were some of my favorite videos to watch in regards to what's going on in the Ripple SEC case, but he has been putting a lot more stuff on Twitter recently, so I want to break down exactly what he's thinking here, what he's putting out, because I think it's going to give you a much better idea of exactly where he sees this case right now. So something that was kind of surprising to me that he actually put out earlier today, someone asked Jaime Hogan, hey, is there any good news we can take from anything that's happened in the last couple of weeks? He said good news is that the longer the decision takes to draft, the better it is for Ripple generally. Now I thought this was pretty interesting because when I was thinking about it, it did seem like it kind of did make sense. The longer Judge Torres takes drafting this bill or drafting her decision, well, the more thought she's having to put into it, which likely means she's having to refute a lot of the SEC's points. If she was just going to completely agree with the SEC, then it would likely be a pretty easy decision. The longer she is taking to craft this ruling, well, it is much more likely that she's having to put in a lot of thought, a lot of time and effort to make sure she counters the SEC's point properly. Now, Stephen Hubert actually put out in response to this, and I thought this was a great point made by him. He said, unfortunately, we thought the same thing for the library case. The judge took much longer than he said he would, and we certainly didn't get a positive result in that case. Now, I think there's one real main point we need to take away from this, and that is the judge in the library case was never siding with library. I mean, this guy could barely understand what a cryptocurrency was, and it always seemed like he was just going to rubber stamp what the SEC said. I think it's really a completely different situation here. It seemed like the judge in the library case just took a long time because he was taking a while to even wrap his head around what a cryptocurrency was. We are in a much different situation in the Ripple SEC case. Judge Torres and Judge Netburn have went out of their way multiple times to literally come out and pretty much chastise the SEC. They literally said that the SEC was not acting in a faithful allegiance to the law, and in one of the first hearings we had, they came out and said, hey, you guys already said that Bitcoin and Ethereum weren't securities. We see XRP as pretty much the same thing as Bitcoin and Ethereum, except maybe it has more utility. Well, these are pretty clear signs that Judge Torres is probably not on the SEC side for the most part, and this actually makes it so, hey, it probably is pretty good news that she's taking more time. Also, I think it's important to understand here that Jaime Hogan has obviously been in a lot of cases. It looks like his overall opinion is the longer the judge takes, the more likely she is to side with the defendants. Well, if we already got kind of a stray from the usual situation in the library case where it actually turned out bad for the defendants, I think it kind of increases the likelihood that we'll get something a little more per normal in this case with the judge taking a little longer. Either way though, I definitely think it's a good sign that Jaime Hogan is at least seeing this as a positive. So now I want to move on and comment on something else Jaime Hogan said, and this is a little more of a nuanced legal issue on exactly how this case could end up. Now, Jaime Hogan is breaking down what would happen if the judge was to split the baby, which I actually think is the most probable scenario, but there ended up being a pretty interesting discussion around this, and I wanted to break it down for you. Jaime Hogan said, if the judge in the Ripple case wanted to split the baby, he said that's a horrific phrase, isn't it? Which is kind of funny. I never thought about it like that, and it kind of is a horrific phrase. Anyway, he said she could rule that sales of XRP since mid-2018 were not securities because even the SEC concedes that Ripple's actions had almost no effect on XRP's price since that point in time. What could that possibly mean? Ripple would pay a fine, which by my calculations they could certainly afford, and move forward with its business now with XRP being the only crypto with clarity. Maybe Coinbase will only be selling Bitcoin and XRP next year. So essentially Jeremy Hogan is saying a pretty neutral ruling for Judge Torres would be, okay, in the early days Ripple, you sold XRP, those were securities, but XRP is not a security anymore. It's so well distributed. There's so many different projects building on the XRP ledger. The supply is being evenly distributed throughout the ecosystem. It just doesn't look like a security anymore. Therefore, Ripple, you can keep moving forward with your business. XRP is not a security. Now, it's pretty interesting to me that he actually considers this a neutral ruling, and Jungle Inc. actually pitched in here, and he says that's not splitting much. That's pretty much a dominating victory for Ripple. And I think what Jungle Inc. is saying here is, hey, if Ripple gets to move forward selling XRP as not a security, how could that really be a win for the SEC? It seems like only Ripple won. And I think we really need to consider something that isn't being talked about a lot. The SEC's entire theory behind why they brought this case is extremely unclear. Legal experts following this case aren't even 100% sure what the SEC is arguing. And let me tell you what I mean. There is one clear thing the SEC is arguing, and that is in the past, Ripple sold XRP like a security. And I think everyone in this community can likely agree Ripple probably had multiple sales in the past where you could say, hey, maybe at that point XRP could have been sold as a security. Now that's not any kind of devastating news for anyone because Ripple pays a fine. They said, sorry, we should have registered that sale, and they move on. It's a slap on the wrist. But in the middle of the SEC case, the SEC kind of slid in this super weird little add-on to what they were charging Ripple for, and that small little add-on made absolutely no legal sense, and that was that XRP itself is actually a security. Now, this was not really in the original brief. There was one tiny little line where it hinted at that, but the SEC has kind of started arguing that, ran away from it, then brought it back up, ran away from it, then kind of put it back in another document, and then kind of ran away from it. So it's really hard to tell if this is one of the core points of the SEC's argument. You just really can't figure out how critical it is to their case. Now, John Deaton is convinced that the SEC is absolutely trying to argue that XRP itself is a security. But on the other hand, I have talked to SEC former lawyers, people who used to work high up at the SEC, and said, no, the SEC is really not arguing this. It's just fluff. They just put it in there to try to put more pressure on Ripple, but the SEC isn't really going after secondary sales here. They're just saying that Ripple sold XRP as a security in the past. So what I'm trying to point out here is that it really depends how Judge Torres interprets the SEC's case. Is she going to accept the fact that the SEC properly laid out an argument for XRP itself being a security? Or is she going to say, look, you kind of just added this on. There was no valid arguments around that. We're going to ignore the fact that you even tried to say something that absurd, and we're just going to focus on Ripple sales. XRP clearly isn't a security. And if that's how she's looking at the SEC's argument, then what Jeremy Hogan put out there is absolutely splitting the baby. Now, if Judge Torres looks at this case differently and thinks, okay, the SEC made some valid points on why XRP could be a security, which I don't think she's going to. Everything we've seen in other cases and this case makes it pretty obvious XRP itself is not a security, and the SEC hasn't even properly argued that. But if you did come in with the interpretation that she is considering that argument, XRP itself being a security, then this really wouldn't be much of splitting the baby. This would be a dominant win for Ripple. So I think it's very important to understand how this case is really being interpreted by Judge Torres. Now, I actually had the honor of having Jeremy Hogan on a live stream, and he is pretty convinced that the whole issue of XRP being a security is kind of out the window. He thinks Judge Torres is pretty much just going to come out and say, look, you haven't even properly argued this. It's clearly not a security. Let's talk about the main issues, and that's how Ripple sold XRP. If that was the case, and I think Jeremy Hogan has pretty much nailed what splitting the baby looks like. She would give Ripple a slap on the wrist for early sales and then say, okay, well, now it's not a security anymore. Keep going on with your business. What XRP is, Who knows? Commodity, digital currency, let Congress figure it out. It's not a security. And I really do think this might be the most realistic outcome for where we're headed. And I just think it's really important to kind of break down what we're looking at, because I think when you think about it like that, it gives you a much better understanding of, hey, what might be off the table, what is still on the table, and what's a realistic outcome based on the core issues being litigated right now. And I want to finish this video off on a topic that I wanted to spend some more time on. Unfortunately, I'm kind of running short on time, so I'm just going to quickly address this and hopefully talk about it more in another video. I have been seeing all kinds of comments all over the place that banks aren't going to actually use XRP, that this is really just hopium, it's a conspiracy theory, banks don't really need to use XRP. Guys, we need to remember that just a couple short months ago, we had the CEO of SBI, one of the largest banks in Japan, say that every bank in Japan will use XRP by 2025. This is not some conspiracy theory. This is not me telling you that every bank in Japan is going to use XRP. This is the CEO of one of the largest banks in Japan. To ignore something like this is absolutely insane. We have CEOs of the largest financial institutions in other countries coming out and saying, no, that's not hopium, that's going to happen. So you can interpret what's going on in this world any way you want. But when I see a CEO of a bank like SBI coming out and saying every bank in Japan is going to use XRP, then my base assumption isn't that, oh, well, that must only be Japan. That's not going to happen anywhere else. Of course not. If I see banks in Japan guaranteeing that they're all going to be using XRP by 2025, well, then my base assumption is a lot of countries all over the world are likely going to do something similar, and almost everyone is going to have some way of adopting a cryptocurrency like XRP. What we're seeing is a rebuilding of the rails for these financial institutions, and the technologies and the protocols that gain adoption now are going to be the new rails for a future financial system built in the internet. The fact that we have XRP already gaining the adoption it has in the financial sector is fantastic. Give me one other cryptocurrency out there that has this kind of institutional and financial adoption in our traditional banking system. I don't see one. There are narratives around other ones like XLM and XDC, and I'm not saying those are bad. I hold some of both, but it is not nearly to the scale of what we see with XRP. People always ask me, why do you pick XRP over XLM? Why do you pick XRP over XDC? It's because of things like this. You just don't see the scale of what is going on with these other cryptocurrencies than you see with XRP. XRP clearly has a big lead for what I think is going to be the most important use case for cryptocurrencies out there. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. It really does mean so much. And for now, Mickle out.